For the last 12 or so months, we've been helping people build products and projects and apps and stuff without code. I actually started as a firefighter at first. I was training to become a firefighter for about 2 years during college. I switched to marketing at the University of Cincinnati, which is where I am based in Cincinnati, Ohio, in the United States. I switched to marketing, ended up working at a hotel group, moved to an outdoor tech company, which I still work at now, and then started running Nucode. But throughout that entire time, essentially, I was building things without code, and there wasn't a name to it. About a year and a half ago, or about 2 years ago, people started using the term NoCode, and that essentially just relates to people building something, whether that's like a digital good or an e-commerce store or something like that, without having to learn how to code. I think it's one of the most important skills that are going to be learned over the next 10 or so years. It empowers pretty much everybody to be able to build whatever they can dream up without code. I know when I was in college, I had a whole list of things like 100 items long, ideas long, that I essentially wanted to build without code, but I never could because I didn't know how to code. That could have been anything from like an app similar to like Uber, like a rideshare app, or like an e-commerce store or something like that. And tools like Shopify and Webflow and Bubble, Card, and a ton of other ones have been able to allow me to build without code. And I know through Nucode, we've been able to help thousands of other people do the same thing. And so today, what we're going to do is I'm going to dive into Bubble a little bit. Bubble is one of our preferred no-code tools. Essentially, you can build whatever you want without code with Bubble. It's probably the most extensive platform. If you're just diving in, it might be good to check out glideapps.com, and I'm going to drop those links in here. So Bubble can be found at bubble.io. GlideApps is a good entry app if you want to check that out. And then you've got other ones. If you're a designer, you would absolutely love Webflow. But for today, we're going to check out Bubble. And I'm going to go ahead and just dive into building a to-do list app without code. And so that's a very basic app, but that actually gives you the fundamentals for building any type of app you'd like in Bubble, similar to like, so posting like a task to a project in Bubble would be the same as like posting maybe like a social media post to maybe a social network that you want to build or something like that. So we're going to dive in. Here is like the dashboard of Bubble. And I'm already created a new app. So when you click new app, you just name it. You can choose a template if you want. So if you have any templates that you can find at bubble.io/templates. And if you're able to see that, it's just at this site. And you can go here, check out some free templates. They have a ton of good ones that are like good learning tools. So you can actually just clone them. When you click use now when they're free, it just adds it to your account. And then, like I showed you a second ago, you can just start a new app based on that template. But for now, we've just opened a new app here for y'all. And so the first thing I'm going to kind of walk through is this sidebar over here. This is kind of like your master list of tasks and things to check out. So right here, you've got design on the top left. This is essentially like an open canvas. If you've used tools like Webflow or GlideApps or any type of other website builder, normally you'll have like a structured canvas where you're dragging and dropping things, but it's going up into sequential order, and everything is kind of structured the way it should be. In Bubble, you actually have free reign over the design of everything, which can be nice, which can also be a little daunting at first. But as you kind of get into the tool, you kind of learn it a little bit better. So like if I was to drop a text box on the page, I could actually just drag it anywhere I want. It makes mobile design a little bit tougher. But as you kind of dive in, you'll notice some tricks and learn some tricks that are able to help you with that. And then, so this is the design canvas. Over here, you'll see your visual elements. You can pretty much drag and drop almost anything you want onto there. So like a button, they already have like pre-configured button styles. But under the styles tab over here, you can change whatever you want for text and buttons and that type of stuff, shadows, colors, whatever you need. And then you've got other elements like HTML. If you want to add custom HTML to the page, or like a map, you can actually just add a map to the page. And then the data source, you can actually make like a list of things that you choose from the database. So I won't go through all of that, but definitely check it out. You can just drag and drop anything you want onto the page. Workflows, if anybody has used a tool similar to like Zapier, which actually lets you connect one tool to another. So if I wanted to connect my Bubble database to something like Webflow or to something like Airtable, I would actually be able to use this workflow setup to actually send data to one thing or another. But in Bubble, you can actually use the Workflows tab to actually send data from Bubble to somewhere else. You can use APIs. You can actually just send, you can set up workflows to like create a new thing. You can set up workflows to log people in if you're creating like a sign up login form or that type of thing. Essentially, there's a whole, so when the page is loaded, let's say I'm just going to choose an action here. So for account, you can do all types of things like sign up to log in with a social network. You can navigate to another page. You can do things with all of the data that's in your database. You can send emails. You can collect payments. You can check out analytics. There's tons of other actions to explore. But we're going to kind of jump over to the data tab now. So this data tab is actually where you're able to set up your database. The data types here is where you're laying out what your database actually looks like. Unlike Airtable or any type of like an Excel sheet or something like that, where you're just looking at a bunch of columns and stuff. In Bubble, you'll actually set up what that data structure looks like. And then under the app data tab, that is where you'll actually see that type of spreadsheet type of look to it. Right now, we've just got all users. So most Bubble apps, they just all new clean like Bubble apps that you create will always just have one type in it at first, and that's a user. And for that user, you're just going to have email. Email is always required, so you can't get rid of that field. But what I'm going to go ahead and do is start to set up our database for this to-do list app. So I'm going to start by adding a new type of data, and that's task. And then under user, maybe I want to put like first name, and we're going to make that field. So when you create a new field under a data type, similar to like creating an Excel sheet, you're just going to choose what type of data that is. So like text, and then we're going to choose last name. We're going to choose text, and you can choose other things. Like if I wanted to make if I wanted to add to people's ages, you could just make that a number, or maybe that's like a date range. Maybe you're collecting like their birth date. Or you can just make that date. You can choose yes, no's, files, images, geographic addresses, whatever you need. And then you can also choose things that relate to another thing. So like under task, what I'm going to do is actually add a field that is that tells the database like, hey, this task was created or should be only seen by this user. So I'm going to choose user, and then I'm going to choose user down there. Or actually, I'm going to make that owner so I know who owns that task. You can also use the creator field if you'd like. Sometimes creating a separate field for like owner actually helps when you have like a team of people that are related to one different task. But we've got our users set up, first name, last name, and email. That's pretty much all we need. We don't need to collect. You don't put a password field in here. The password is actually never seen by you. For your users. You can obviously help them reset passwords and stuff, but Bubble makes sure that security is at the forefront of the app, so you never actually see it in your own database. And then under task, we've got owner, we've got our creator, which essentially is going to be the same thing. We've got our modified date, and we've got our created date. So now what we're going to do is go to app data, and now under app data, you'll see those fields that we just created, and for each different type of data. And then we're going to go back to the design tab, and we are going to make this. Actually, I'm going to make a new type of field under task, and that's going to be status, because we need to know what status that specific task is in. And I'm going to make that text, and then we are going to go back here. And then we're also going to make this finished tasks. Or actually, we're going to make this to do. And then we're going to, maybe I'm going to bold that just so you can see it a little bit easier. Make this the whole width of the page. You can edit the page width and stuff just by clicking on the background here, and then choosing like a width for now. My MacBook's a little bit smaller, so I'm just choosing 800 pixel width so that you guys can see all the work that I'm doing now. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a max width to this. Not a fixed width, but a max width, so that when the page stretches, it's always in the center and it doesn't get longer than 800 pixels, because that would get a little cumbersome. And then what we're going to do is we're going to add a repeating group. Now, essentially a repeating group is a list of things. And that list of things is dependent on whatever you choose. So when I drag in, you can either so when you click repeating group, then you're just going to click into the canvas. I'm going to drag it right here, and I'm going to make it 24. I'm going to make that 16 pixels. I'm not a designer, by the way, so just don't fault me on this. Let's see. I'm going to put the add button. I'm going to change the text of this button real quick to new task. I'm going to put that on the right. And I'm going to go ahead and group the to-dos, group elements in a group. And then I'm going to center that vertically. And then I'm going to move that back up. And then what we're going to do is we're actually going to make this list a little bit longer. We're going to shorten it because we don't need that high. So what you'll see here is you'll see 4 boxes in a single column right here. Now what that is telling us is that there's 4 cells, 4 rows in that. And when you click on it, you'll actually see this little editor box pop up, and you can drag that around the canvas. Pretty much everything that you click on will actually have this edit box, and that is where you kind of fix all the settings for that specific thing. In a lot of editors like Webflow and stuff, you'll actually see the editor on the right, but Bubble is kind of nice and flexible. It allows you to kind of drag around those settings to wherever you need, and then you get full reign of the canvas, which is really nice. So I'm going to move that back over to the right. And then when I click on repeating group, I'm going to make this I'm going to make this unfinished tasks list. So when you type in there, that's pretty much just giving it a name. When you are choosing a type of content for your list, I'm going to choose a task. That could be anything. So let's say you're making a database of like users or something. You would just choose users, and then you would put different pieces of data inside of each cell. But for now, we're going to choose task. What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my data source. Now, the best thing about Bubble is like you don't have to go outside. You don't have to connect an external database. You already have built your database in the app. So we've created a task list. And what we're going to do is we're going to do a search for. The majority of the time, you're going to do a search for something. So we're going to do a search for, and we're going to choose tasks. Now, these constraints are telling it, like, hey, I don't want to choose every task. I might want to choose a task that has a specific field that is unfinished or something like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to make task. First, we're going to make sure the owner equals current user, right? Because we only want to show people tasks that are owned by them or created by them. And then what we're going to do is we're going to choose status. You can choose different options. So like if it's a number field, you may choose like number is greater than and type in something random. But for this, we're going to make status equals. And what we're going to choose is incomplete. So we're going to call those incomplete. And so now every time I create a new task that shouldn't be complete yet, what we're going to do is we're going to add an incomplete to the status field. And that just tells Bubble that in this list, we only want to load tasks that are unfinished. And then under layout style, I'm just going to choose full list so that we can always see what all of the tasks essentially that are in this search. You can choose things like extended vertical scrolling. That's like a whole list, like the full list will be loaded, but it lazy scrolls. and then it lazy loads, sorry. And then you'll have like vertical scrolling, fixed number cells. So if you only want to show like four rows, you might show that. You can also choose like more columns. So let's say you're making like a Airbnb app. You might have like multiple columns of houses. And so I just chose 5, and that kind of just split it up into a 4x5 column or a 4x5 row and column database. And then, so I'm going to go back to 1. And then what I want to do is I want to add a checkbox to each row to make sure that this task, checkboxes are kind of easy to use. You can also use things like a regular group. Pretty much you can use anything in Bubble to actually designate whether a task is unfinished or finished. Checkboxes are easy because it's a native thing within Bubble where you're just clicking the checkbox for that cell, and it just labels it as complete or toggles it on and off. So what I'm going to do is actually yes, I want a checkbox still in there. What I'm going to make this is task. So when you click on something like this, like inside of a cell, what you're going to do is you're going to choose under label. I want to make this label the task name. So I'm going to choose insert dynamic data. I'm going to choose current cells task. And then I'm going to, I actually need to give a title to those tasks. So I'm going to go back to the database. I forgot a title for each task, and I'm going to make that text. And then I'm going to make this current cells tasks title. So now Bubble, each cell will actually have each task in it labeled with a checkbox. And then since that is actually a checkbox, what I'm going to do is actually change that to what I'm going to do is add a finished field, and I'm going to choose yes. And then I'm going to center that vertically in each cell. I'm also going to I'll leave that dotted line, but I'm going to make it a solid line so that I see the whole task list. Unchecked. Preset value. So you can choose like whether the preset status is unchecked or checked. But what we're going to do is we are going to add another text box down here. We're going to make this finished. So I want to make another list of finished tasks just so that you guys can see that it is actually, when we create that workflow for Bubble to tell Bubble like, hey, this task is done, I'm just going to show you how that is set up in the database, how it's set up in workflows. You can pretty much also copy and paste stuff. So like I just copied this repeating group, and I just copied it and pasted it down below underneath finished, which is where we're going to keep this type of thing. And this is going to be a list of our finished tasks. So what we're going to do is we're going to change status to complete, and we're also going to make finished equals yes. All right. And we're going to add that same constraint to our first group. So that finished equals no, because if the task is not done, we don't want it. If the task is done, we don't want it to show up in our incomplete. And we're going to actually just change this to incomplete tasks. So that's a little bit clearer. Now, when we create a new task, what we're going to want to do is start a workflow, and I'm just going to make that smaller. When I click new task, it shows this little button right here under the settings screen, under the settings bar for that, and it's start edit workflow. So we're going to click start and edit workflow. And then, so when button new task is clicked, click here to add an action. I'm going to click that. I'm going to choose data because I want to create a new thing. And that is a task. So I want to create a new task. I want to choose the type task. You can also choose type, like if you have other things in your database, you can just choose that, or you can create a new type if you want. We're going to make finished equals no. We're going to make owner equals current user. set another field. And so all these fields you're adding you're basically saying like, hey, when I create this new task, I want to give all of these fields preset values or something. You can make that dynamic data. You can make it whatever you'd like. You can even make it based on the user, which is awesome. But for this, we're just making a simple task list. So finished equals no, owner equals current user, status equals incomplete. Gotta get rid of that. Incomplete. And title. Oh, actually forgot to. What I'm going to do is move all of this down. Now, one thing I did forget to add was an input box, because we need to give each task a title, right? Like people need to know what that task actually is. So we're going to add that to the left here. We're going to make sure that button is all the way to the right. We're just going to set it up like this. And then we're going to call this new tasks input box. And then when I go back to that workflow, I'm going to choose title equals, and I'm going to type in new tasks. And that little input box, I'm actually able to use that input box to tell Bubble that I want to use that value, that new tasks inputs box's value as the new title for when I create stuff. And then what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that this is unchecked. We're going to make sure this one, because this is actually in the finished column and only finished tasks are going to be in here, we want to make sure that that preset status for this one is checked. And then what we're going to do is we're going to finished tasks checkbox, and we're going to call this one incomplete tasks checkbox. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up another workflow. When an element is clicked, I'm going to make that. Oops, I'm actually not going to do that. I'm going to make this value dynamic, and I'm going to make this current cells tasks finished. So then now it's actually telling Bubble that the current cells tasks should actually just be based on whether the task is finished or not. So now we're going to go to preview. And I just noticed, if you guys notice, all of this stuff is like so wide, it goes all the way to the edges. That's because it's on the edge, technically on my page. I'm just going to group all of this stuff together, group elements in a group, and I'm going to make that, give it a max, apply a max width when stretched. I'm going to go to the responsive tab, and I'm going to choose, make sure that's centered. The responsive tab is also nice to use. I'll show you guys that in a second again. But that basically is just an area where you can tell Bubble like, hey, all of these, this input box, I want to make left aligned. I don't want it to have a fixed width. This button should be right aligned. I don't want it to have, or I want it to have a fixed width and that type of stuff. So that's kind of where you just edit the responsiveness. You can like make sure that your app looks good on mobile devices as well. And so we're all set there. And I'm just going to start this list. Let me add that back in. Complete. All right. So we're going to start off with a blank page, right? Because we don't have anything actually set in here. So I'm going to make a new task, and I'm going to call it like join the webinar, and I'm going to click new task. Oh, and we've got a new task here that was just created. I'm going to click that, and that should change it. What we're going to do is we're going to go check back on that. Somebody trying to talk? Okay.
Hello.
Hey, yeah.
Yeah, Joy, I want to let the participant know that if you have any question, any doubt, feel free to ask. Okay. Okay, continue.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, you can check and uncheck. What I think maybe that's the a limitation that I did not prepare ahead of time or think of ahead of time. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a group instead. I'm actually going to get rid of these little checkboxes here. I'm going to make a tiny little group, or actually I'm going to choose an icon. And I'm going to make that 20 pixels. 20 pixels. I'm going to make it a box or an outline. I'm going to find a small circle. We're going to center that vertically. We're going to add a text box to here. We're going to make this current cell tasks title, and then we're going to make that a little bit bigger. We're going to stretch that the width of the whole thing. Make that a little bit bigger. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go ahead and copy and paste that into the other repeating group. And then I'm going to set a conditional. Conditionals are actually really nice. So what I'm doing is I'm actually, just so everybody's aware, I'm getting rid of those checkboxes that we created. I don't think we're actually able to set up this to-do list app the same way that I wanted to. So what we're going to do is we're going to choose current set. We're going to make these little icons. Now what we're going to do, every time I click this icon, we're going to fill that bubble in, and then we're going to move it to the finished task. And then we're also going to, if it's in the finished area and we want to uncheck it, then we're also going to move it back to incomplete. So finished circle icon and incomplete icon. And we're going to set up a workflow on this little icon here. When that bubble is clicked, we want to make changes to a thing, and that is current cell task. We're going to choose finished equals yes, status equals finished. And that should be all we need to change. And then we're going to change this one. Since that is the finished task, we're actually going to change that and make that task finished equals no, and status equals finished. And we're going to change this to incomplete. Oh, so we actually need to make that incomplete. Finished. And then when the finished icon is clicked, we want to make that incomplete. I'm going to go ahead and copy that. I'm going to make this. We're going to go ahead and preview that real quick. And then I'm going to go ahead and change this create new task. Make sure that's incomplete. Finished is no. Owner is correct. Yep, status incomplete, finished, complete, finished. All right, cool. So now we've got these two options here. So you notice when I click that little button, now we also want to make sure that this little bubble is filled in so that we know like that it is actually a finished task. So this is actually a good opportunity to see the conditional column. So current cells tasks finished equals yes. Then we want to change the icon. So these conditionals, you can do lots of calculations. You can pretty much change anything you want for any given object. If it's like a task list, and maybe like if it's a complete, if you want to like put the status over here in text value, you can, and make like if current cells task is finished, You could put that here. Then maybe like the text is different or something like that. But for this, it's an icon. So we're going to actually just change the icon from that circle icon to like a filled in circle. And we're going to reload the page. And we're going to add a couple other tasks here. I'm just going to type in a bunch of gibberish. And we're going to just add a bunch of these. And then I'm going to get rid of that. And so we've got our incomplete task column and our complete. We're going to click all of these. And then we're going to unclick them. So when I click them in finished, they're not going back to incomplete. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure our tasks are finished.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So hi, Joe. It's amazing that I'm doing this with you. Actually, I am like following along, and I have done the database, and I'm a little bit slow with the design. You're way faster. But could you please explain me the workflow? How does it actually work? Because I'm struggling a bit with that.
Yeah, for sure. Like which part of the workflow? Like creating new tasks, like from the button, or from like changing?
Yeah, from the buttons.
Okay, so when you click a button, so like in your app, you're gonna be creating buttons, and I'm glad you guys are like following along and actually like building it during this time. It's awesome. But when you have a button in any app, right, you want that button to do something, like an action should be taken or something like that. So what you're gonna do, are you able to see this button when you are editing, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna click that button, and what you're doing by clicking that button, you're saying like start and start a workflow on the click of that button.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I get it.
When you click that, you'll have this option right here. So like you can make this actually whatever you want, but when button new task is clicked, then I want to do something, and that's where you have like these lists of actions. And I want to create a new task. It could be anything you want. Maybe that's like a login button. Maybe it's like a sign up button, and you are doing different things. But for this one, we're just creating a data type. And again, that one is under data. So when you click here to add an action, you go to data, and then you click create a new thing.
Create new thing. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then it'll pop up here. You'll choose your task type, and then you'll start setting fields. You can click to add as many fields as you want. Or you can use
unable to add the fields. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
You can also use this little handy add all fields, and that's pretty much going to say like if you're creating a new thing, I want to add something to every field. A lot of times you'll get into a type of thing where you're going to add like 100 fields, and so this little button will just add all of them. So then you'll notice we've got our finished. And we can delete them all again, and we can add them all again. So that one's handy to like just add all the fields to the screen without having to like go through and click each time. All right.
Okay. Yeah.
You got it?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, perfect. So it looks like our finished, and this, you'll be troubleshooting a lot of your apps most of the time. So like right here, you'll notice when I click this, it's actually not moving it back to the incomplete column. So I need to double check that workflow. And by going back to the icon there, I can click start edit workflow. What you'll see here is we actually are creating a new task, but that's not what we want to do. So I had set that up incorrectly. What we want to do is we want to make a change to a thing. And I think I actually, incomplete. Yeah, we want to make changes to a thing. You can actually copy tasks as well, like actions in between things. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that. So like when you right click on something, you can click copy, and then I'm going to right click back in there and paste that. And then it just adds it back in. What we're going to do is when finished circle icon is clicked, we want to choose no. And then we want to make that finished incomplete. Status is incomplete now. So let's see if that fixed it. Yep. So notice we've actually got our list items going back up. We can add more here. Now you'll notice like when I type in something and click at new task, it's not actually getting rid of what's typed into the input, the new task bar. And that would be kind of cumbersome if like people are trying to fix, or if they're trying to add a bunch of tasks all at once. So I'm going to group these in a group. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose the new task workflow. And after I create the new task, what I want to do is I want to empty that input so that it's actually, there's nothing in it. And I'm going to go to element actions, and I'm going to reset inputs. Now this should actually reset that input so that it's never, yep. So you notice we actually just added a new task, but then the input box is actually gets emptied, right? So then we add the new task, it gets emptied. And then I want to go a step further, and I want to say, like, if somebody is trying to add like 100 different tasks, and that's kind of cumbersome, what I want to do is I want to have them type in something. I want to have them click the button. I want to have the input empty itself. And then I want to have the input refocus so that like somebody can continue typing all they have to do is type the task, hit enter, type the task, hit enter, instead of having to use their mouse to like click back into the input box each time. So the other thing we're going to do is we're going to go to element actions, and we're going to choose an input action, and we're going to choose set focus, and we're going to choose the new task input box. So now every time I click new task, it should actually refocus. It should empty the input box and then refocus back on that input. So I'm going to type in a task, hit enter, and then my input is still focused, but I want you guys to be able to see that a little bit better. So we're going to actually make this input box. We're going to remove the style of it. And when it is focused, when this input is hovered or this input is focused, we actually want to make the background color, we're going to make the border colors actually a little bit different. Blue. And then we're going to make the buck shadow style upset. Buck shadow color also blue. So now it looks very ugly, but we're going to type something in. We're going to hit enter, and then it's still focused. So when it's focused or hovered, it's going to have that style to it. And we're just going to keep adding stuff. We're going to click out. We're going to finish a bunch of these tasks, and then they're all complete. And then if you want to like move something back to the incomplete column, you can. This is like a good this is like a good starter template, and I'll actually give this to everybody. I'll give you a link to this template so that you can check it out in the editor. Under settings, I'm just going to make sure that this app is, and you can make your apps private. You can make them everyone can view or everyone can edit. I'm going to make mine so that everybody can view it. And what I'm going to do, yeah.
Yeah, so like you build this one. I just had a question about like think of like imagine you are building something and you face a certain problem. So is it easy to debug in this kind of an environment? Like because when you see code, it's obviously easier to debug that. But when you're working with a no-code environment, is it easier to debug then?
Yeah, so what's nice about Bubble is that normally up here, you'll actually see like an error message if there are any problems with your app, like if a piece of data is incomplete or like if it's mapping something incorrectly or something like that, they'll actually have this up here. They also do have a debugger that is, you'll notice down here actually.
Oh, yeah.
And so this actually lets you check out in a normal pace, slow, step-by-step, whatever you really need. And you can also choose like what pages, and then you can click inspect, and it'll kind of show you everything you need. So it's,
okay.
Yeah. We don't have any issues in this app, unfortunately. Like I could probably create some in a few minutes, but that would be like, if you need to debug, like this is probably the easiest.
Okay.
Easiest way to do it, yeah.
All right.
And so I think that's about it for creating like a very simple app. I think that's a good step into like creating like, the one thing I can recommend is to like maybe go and try open a new Bubble app and maybe try to like clone Twitter. I think honestly they have profile pages. They have like they have like a feed of posts from different users. They have logging in and logging out, like a user auth system in it. Like honestly, but Twitter is a good app to clone inside of Bubble to like make sure that you're getting all of the basics down so that you can go out and build whatever you want. Because creating and manipulating new and new data is important, and then creating profile pages and like dynamic pages is important, and then creating like user auth flows is important, and all of that can be done by cloning Twitter. So my biggest recommendation would be to go out and try to clone, or like create maybe your version of Twitter, whatever you want to do, but just to get the basics down. And then before I kind of turn it over for questions and other questions and answers, I'm going to show you this plugins tab. And this is actually where you can, this is an extremely powerful part of Bubble. You can actually create your own plugins with Bubble, or you can go in here and kind of search for different plugins that you might want to use. Similar to like a WordPress site or a Shopify app store or something, you'll just have tons of apps to be able to use. So let's say we wanted to add like Twitter auth. Bubble actually has their own plugin for that. So let users log in with their Twitter accounts. You can click install. You do still have to get like your API keys and stuff like that from Twitter, but it's pretty straightforward for the most part. If I wanted Google login, I would type in Google. They've got a bunch of Google plugins in here, but let users log in with their Gmail account. So I want to add that, and maybe like I want to add an email one. So I'll type in email. Maybe I want the Simple Analytics plugin to help me keep track of my different pages, page analytics and stuff like that. You can just add that pretty easily, and then you'll have all of your plugins over here to add your keys to and things. And that's pretty much it. I think I'll turn it over for questions and answers. I know this was a lot, to be honest, but I'm excited to see what you guys build. We actually have a couple challenges up right now, and I'll just go ahead and share that with you really quick. We do have a couple challenges up on Nucode right now. So if you go to this little menu button, click challenges, you'll get to this page. If you guys want to check out Bubble, we have our 100 days of no code. I'd strongly recommend like getting on Twitter, posting about your no code journey. Like if you're starting to build something or just getting into no code. Everybody is kind of doing this 100 days of no code journey. You can create an app built in Bubble and submit it here. And I think there's probably like 70 days left. And if you build something within those 70 days or multiple things within 70 days on Bubble, you can submit it here and potentially win like a 3-month subscription, pro subscription for Bubble. And then we've also got a No Code Connects Us. So if you're building something that will benefit people that are affected by COVID-19, or just the fact that people are physically distanced right now, you can, and you want to build it with a Dalo. That is actually like a good mobile app builder and a web app builder combined. You can submit it here as well. And you could win there's a potential lifetime pro Adalo subscription, and I'm going to throw that website in there as well. So those are good ways to also get started and not feel any pressure and just kind of like dive into no code as much as possible. But yeah, I think I'll turn it over for questions and answers. If you guys have any anyway, but I'm excited to see what you guys build.
Hey Joe, I do have a question though.
Yeah.
About the no code solution, like the platform basically. Do you think like this is the future for web development? Because if it is, then there's a lot of jobs of web developers which is going to be at risk, and I'm not really sure, but.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think a lot of people are concerned about that, and they're rightfully so. There's like good reasons and bad reasons to be thinking about like losing jobs. I for one think that this is going to create more jobs for developers than previously. When you take out only 99.5% of people know how to code. Or don't know how to code, right? So 0.5% of the world actually knows how to code. We've never needed more developers than we do now. And by actually allowing the 99.5% of people that don't know how to code to like go out and build whatever they'd like without needing a developer, that actually gives them like a stepping point to actually hiring a developer in the future. Like most people's business is not to like go out and build an app. Like I personally am not I'm in the business of building apps, but like the barber down the street from me might be able to go and build something for themselves that they are just going to get them started with. But they aren't in the business of like building apps. So they would outsource that to somebody eventually. I also think that developers will actually be able to work on things that are far more interesting than a lot of these basic marketing websites and smaller like web apps and stuff. After visual development becomes a larger part of the ecosystem. You know what I mean? So like developers have tons of things on their plate, right? They're just most developers are backlogged for days, and there's just no reason for it. They should be working on the most interesting projects and the most worthwhile projects for them. And this kind of opens that up for them. So like instead of like, you might have like a couple freelance projects. One's like really interesting. Maybe it's like the next Uber. And then you've got a couple other ones that are just marketing sites, right? And so those can be built by other people. And so I think this just opens up more opportunity for developers, to be honest.
Yeah, but frameworks like React or Angular, I don't think they'll be going down anytime soon. But still, NoCode is, I think it's going to be pretty high in the future. But I think the being able to see the code actually is also something which the developers will consider.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's a big net positive though for developers. All right, does anybody else have any questions?
Hello, Joy. I have a question.
Yeah.
What's your view on NoCode in field of machine learning and AI?
So my view, and I've expressed that I think on the last couple podcasts that I was on, AI and machine learning and like voice are definitely like the three parts that have not really been voice flow actually, and I'll drop that in the chat as well. Voice flow is actually a good representation of like building voice apps, but AI and machine learning, they haven't been touched too much by NoCode yet, I don't think. There's one company, I think it's called Obviously.ai. They might be the closest to coming up with some type of NoCode app builder for AI and machine learning. But again, I don't think it's been touched too much. I think we're a little ways off. Like that's still being developed by a lot of like major companies and startups right now. And it took a while to get to a point where Webflow and like Bubble and these larger web app builders were actually able to build something worthwhile for most consumers. So I think we're a little ways off from at least like people building like their own AI and machine learning type of apps. You know what I mean? So like we've got a little ways off from that, I think, but not too far away.
Okay.
So yeah, that was fun, right? We got to learn a bit about it, and I guess with that, students can start with it and make stuff on NoCode and Bubble, and maybe tag you, and you can see and feel good about it. So yeah, so guys, you can text Joe on Twitter or LinkedIn, and if you have any doubts, or you can just DM us at MSP Secret, and we'll solve your issues about NoCode. And it was really good having you over here, Joe. Thank you for taking time, and it was really fun.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. If anybody has any questions, you can find me. I'm going to go ahead and drop my email and my Twitter profile link in the chat. If anybody has any questions or anything, feel free to reach out. I was definitely in that student position a few years ago, and NoCode was able to help me out quite a lot. And that's pretty much what I do full time now. So if anybody has any questions or anything or needs help or some guidance or anything, just let me know. I also dropped my email in there if you have any questions specifically about building anything without code or especially Bubble. Feel free to reach out there. And again, we've also got the Nucode forum as well. If you are just looking for looking to find other people that are also building without code and kind of finding some other no-code makers. So
great, awesome.
All right, thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
It was a great session. Thank you.